Hello, EnderSword here again, this time with a Gold League game. This one was posted on the TeamLiquid.net strategy forums by our Terran player something, FLshiLLi or something like that. I don't really care, I'm just going to call him the Terran player. But he was basically having problems with Zergs, particularly with Banelings, just having a hard time splitting his forces up or really dealing with large Ling-Baneling attacks, and kind of wanted to know how to deal with that. So he posted a few games, and we're going to take a look at one against his opponent, the Zerg player Demolition. So the three key things that we're going to look at during the course of this game in terms of dealing with the Banelings are, number one, the idea of just keeping your production running at all times. Very often people will point to something and kind of say, well, that is the thing I have trouble with. But when you actually look at the game, you kind of see, well, yeah, you do seem to have trouble with that, but it's just kind of that's what he used to kill you. It wasn't necessarily that you lost because of that thing. It's just you lost to that thing. That's what he made. But you could have actually done a lot more to out-macro that player, out-produce that player, and at that point it just wouldn't have mattered if he had made the exact same thing. You still would have had enough stuff and enough production to just go after them and completely take them out, regardless of the fact that that's what they made. Second thing that we're going to look at is the idea of pre-spreading your forces, setting up a good position. Terran is very positional, and a lot of it comes from pre-planning. It's not always the case that you just run your entire force in or set up a defensible position and it's just however they rallied or ran in. You want to be pre-planning out what your attack's going to look like, what your defenses look like, and when you're moving out onto the map, particularly when you're approaching Zerg creep, you want to be keeping in mind what the formation of your force should actually be looking like. You want to be spreading your troops out and spreading your tanks out in particular so that you have an area to run through that is going to cause a lot of area of effect damage to the Zerg player, as well as give you basically cushion against whether or not you get a portion of your army surrounded or hit by Banelings or whatever. You want to pre-spread instead of having everything just clumped into a single ball. It's certainly a good idea to keep it in mind, and there's times that you aren't actually doing something, aren't actually attacking, when you can set that all up ahead of time so that you're in a more advantageous position later. And it applies not only to normal troops, but you'll need it for things like, say, ghosts later on, where you want to spread them out so that they don't get all feedback at the same time or fungal at the same time or something of that nature. The next thing that we're going to look at is, of course, the idea of never sitting on creep. You never ever want to do this, because as long as you're just sitting there on creep, the Zerg player knows exactly where you are. They know the exact formation of your army, they know the exact composition of your army, and they know how to deal with it. You're also sitting on something that gives them a natural speed advantage, and given that that's already what they have with speed Banelings and speedlings, as well as mutas, they've got that speed advantage over you. Why would you sit on something that's amplifying that? So you want to make sure that you're clearing out creep as you go. You want to be kind of doing pushes onto that area that incorporate scans to get rid of creep tumors, and really only moving onto that or through it if you're actually making a decisive attack that you're planning to do. If you're actually just sitting on it as part of a central defensive position, you definitely want to be clearing the tumors out of there so they can't see what you're actually doing. So in the game so far, we've got what looks to be a Hellion Harass opening. He went for the reactor, swapped it out for the factory, and he's going to be expanding behind that. So he gets a few of the Hellions out on the map. And at this point, I'll just point out the idea of, again, preparing for potential attacks. We've got 3 Marines down that are kind of sitting around in the area, but they're all just completely out in the open, sitting there, and this could be very easily surrounded by a bunch of Lings. This could be hit by a single Baneling and take all 3 out. It's not in a very defensible position. He's got the supply depot down, even though he's not really planning There's no really need to rally things down here. The position of the factory allows those to come out anyway without that being down. So there's just certain things, precautions that you can take to prevent, say, a big Ling run by, prevent these from getting surrounded, things like that, that you can be doing when there's no actual imminent attack, but just pre-plan for, well, what if there was an attack right now? What would my situation look like? He's got the Hellions out, but due to the formation here, I'm not sure if he knows about it. He hasn't poked up his ramp yet, but this probably won't be doing a lot. To have Hellions out on the map here, but we've got 2 spine crawlers. Yes, only Lings guarding this ramp, but as he pokes up, he's going to see pretty quickly this is probably not something I'm going to safely be able to attack into. Those are fairly well positioned. Ramp is blocked. 2 queens down in this area. He would basically have to get all the way down in here, trap himself before he would have access to these drones. He can't come in this angle, so it was a correct decision to just kind of move those back. One thing he can be doing with these, since he has made the investment, is picking off some of the creep tumors. It can be of great benefit to just use some of your scans to make sure that the creep spread is a little bit under control and is not getting out too fast, too quick. You can see that the Zerg player, despite being adverse to spending his money, is actually getting the tumors out there. He was supply locked for a long time, and both players are allowing their money to get really high, which isn't a great thing to see. He's gone ahead and researched Stim, but isn't getting combat shields at this point. When you've got this much money kind of left over, and there's nothing he's particularly teching to or gearing towards right now. He's already got the starport started and isn't planning any large expenditures other than just the troops that he's not building nearly enough of. We've only got 1 barracks working out of the 5. This force could be a lot bigger at this point. You really want to be getting that upgrade. It does make a big difference when you come to fight Lings, fight Banelings, and the more health that you can put on these things, basically think of it as a free stim. You're gaining 10 life on your Marines, which means the first stim on you that you use on them just brings them down to the same level they were anyway. So it's a very cost-effective upgrade to be going for. It just increases the survivability a ton, and I do recommend that you definitely be getting that, particularly when he's going for a very marine-heavy force. There's just no reason not to be getting that, although finally is, but definitely a lot quicker than that. He probably could have been a lot more aggressive. He's keeping an eye out with the Hellions, but again, the creep tumors are keeping an eye on the Hellions themselves. At this range, he can just totally see exactly where these are at all times. If he wanted to dart in and do this, he knew exactly where they were. There was no deception to it. He knew completely there's 4 free Hellions just sitting on my creep. He should have pulled those back and got them either with the main army or at least been moving them around a bit, clearing out some of these creep tumors and so on. At least it does reveal the mutas on the map, but in a ZBT that shouldn't be a great surprise anyway. There's not an overcommitment to them, and he did already know has a few missile turrets in place in order to be able to deal with that. It's not a great map for the muta harass from this angle, simply because there's not a lot of airspace here. That's as far as it goes, so you can't really line them along this this wall without getting completely trapped by the turrets, by the Marines. There's a little more space in the north, but you're still going around areas that could just be Marine hit a fair bit. So it's not the best muta harassment map. Just the design of it, particularly the positions that these 2 players are in, he'd really have to swing around a fair bit to get a good angle at it. Now the Zerg player just going with the fairly standard army. This is the type of thing that the Terran player should be expecting, and Terran is also going for the fairly standard army. Tanks, Marines, medevacs out on the map with a couple of Hellions just still kind of kicking around. The siege tech is also quite a bit late, just like the combat shields. You want to see that a bit earlier. It would make this position a lot more defensible. And again, here's an area where spreading out or pre-spreading would make a lot of sense. To have everything clumped up like this, particularly with these supply depots now down, if the Zerg force just kind of came up into that area at that time, there's nowhere to run or hide from a large Baneling push into it. There's nowhere to back up to, there's nowhere to retreat to. Siege tech is now done, but these aren't actually sieged. Get 2 tanks completely next to each other, and this force just kind of sitting there. You want to be moving that back into the position you actually want it to be in, and not just leaving things where they kind of sit. Mutas luckily have largely been repelled at this point. There's not a lot that they've done. Our Zerg player isn't really adding a lot to his Muta count. He's kind of taking a random shot there. What he's somewhat trying to do is just prevent this third from being taken, and it would be hard to kind of float over there at this point. However, with this many Marines, there's no reason he couldn't take half a detachment here and secure it while he did end up taking that third base. Instead, the Terran players decided, all right, the Muta harassment hasn't really done a lot. I think I'm okay with what I've got. And we're going to turn on our production and see as he moves out onto the creep and then sits here in a very compact ball, the Zerg player can see exactly what this is. He's not even going to the watchtower, which then has a Zergling in it, and everything is very balled up. The siege does not even begin to happen until it's way too late, and everything just gets absolutely run over. We do have a few Marines coming in behind that, but it's not nearly enough, not the same type of force that you need. Tanks get cleaned up, the Lings running around, medevacs just kind of sitting there responding slowly after that before trying to go home. You don't want to be forgetting that they're there. One of your first priorities after you realize that things have completely gone to hell is get them immediately out of there and back to the safety of your Marines. The Marines can also be darting forward in that case to get underneath the Mutalisks and push them back. He probably could have saved 2 or 3 more of those medevacs as opposed to losing as many as he did. Tank won out but isn't restarting production. Overall, his production facility is being very underused, making 3 Marines when he could be making about 8 of them at the moment. It's not a matter of not having money, just isn't actually making them. This reactor got picked off on the starport, never actually got replaced. He could either be swapping that out with one of the barracks, since I would prioritize the medevac technology over having 2 Marines versus 1. So I would have just immediately swapped those out and then started rebuilding on the barracks instead. At home, he's mined out here, so he's just now going to transition into a third. A lot of players do think of this as, now I'm taking my third base. If you've taken your third base when your main is actually mined out, you're still running off 2 bases. It's just that you're mining off a third one now when your first one is extinguished. You really want to be hitting the point that you're mining actively from 3 or 4 bases, that you're able to get things consistently out of a factory, multiple factories at all times, multiple starports at all times, and even more barracks than this. So he's just kind of remounting the same force that he had. So overall, the Terran production has not increased for about 10 minutes. This is the same basic level of production he had about 9-10 minutes into the game. Conversely, the Zerg player now has a base, a macro hatch, a hatch, a hatch, a hatch. This is a lot more production. He's been teching up along the way. He's now got those Ultralisk scout on the map. He's got plenty of Banelings, plenty of Lings. He's actually skimped a lot on the Mutalisks. It's not something that you see a lot in CVP to have actually as few Mutalisks as he made. But we'll notice during this game, the siege tanks haven't been a big factor. They're already still not sieged up here. They're just kind of be rallied to the front, and there's only 2 of them. So he successfully reset the siege tank count and knows that that is not a huge problem. Usually what you want to be doing is clearing out the bioforce, and then the mutas come in and kill the siege tanks. Well, he knows that's not even an issue, so he can just do it with the ground force that he actually has. Overall here, only a slight actual advantage in supply, about 23 supply going on here, but the Terran just has no ability to replace this army. His tech is just kind of whatever it is. There's no ghosts coming out, anything like that for snipe. And in the meantime, the Zerg player has just completely teched up behind this, knows that he can walk in. There was no spread here, there was no pre-spread, and so the Banelings can just kind of go to town on this. I think he's overstepping a bit and then decides to attack his own armory, obviously just a misclick. But overall, they're just kind of get wiped out, and it's due to not having very many tanks on the map, not having that force split up, having them all just completely dying in this choke here, and not having any awareness of the map or anything like that. So overall, just not a great position to be in at the start of any one of those fights, and he does blame the Banelings for that. But that's not really the cause of it. While the Banelings are the thing that was used to kill him, we can see that the Zerg's production was just out of control. Even though he didn't spend a lot of his money, he had the capacity to just be making tons of stuff. If we look at the units, he's got 41 larvae here. Even if this attack had absolutely failed, let's say that there were 8 tanks up top and a bunch of marauders and stuff, and this Zerg army was completely wiped out at this point, it doesn't even matter. He could take all this larva and just turn it into pure lings and wipe the guy out completely. So it didn't really matter at this point. We've had stagnated Terran production throughout the game. He just added another factory to this, realizing that his tank count was so low. But we've got no addition on the barracks at any point in the game. He was only ever really on the 2 base because this one got mined out. So getting this one back online just kept his economy in the same rate, whereas the Zerg economy has actually been getting better over time, and his technology has been improving over time. He wasn't going all in on this, certainly not all in given that his economy was great, but he wasn't even relying on this to actually win the game. It just happened to. He was going for a greater spire here, continuing to research upgrades for his Mutalisks, which would eventually turn into Corruptors and Broodlords later on, transitioning into that. He was going for a Neural Parasite to pick off, I guess to pick off tanks, but obviously was going to transition into that technology. We had the Hive up, everything like that. So he was continuing to tech up, expand production throughout the game, whereas the Terran completely stagnated on it and never actually made a move that was going to be threatening to the Zerg player. And when he did actually move his army out, just in a inability to actually set that up in a way that could deal with the Zerg force, which he could have done ahead of time had he come into this area, scanned the area, held the watchtower, split his tanks up, actually sieged them before the engagement. If you're about to engage the Zerg player and the first thing that you have to hit is siege mode, odds are you've lost that battle already, because it's never going to be done in time. Engagements with a Baneling force are over almost instantly. It's not like you're fighting roaches where it's just a wave of attack. This just swarms over you, particularly when you're on creep. If you have to start siege when you see them, it's already too late. So you want to be in that siege mode and then unsieging the ones in the back, kind of leapfrogging them forward, taking off the creep tumors as they go, letting that creep absorb into the ground or whatever the hell happens to creep, and move in and get into positions where you're just sieging up around their bases, hopefully catching them in a choke, catching them on a ramp, catching them in the place that they can't really get that surround, and where you have a clear path that you can retreat back away from your siege tanks, hopefully allow them to do a lot of AoE damage to the Zerg player, and cause any Zerg player that did actually 1A The whole idea is you pull your bio back and your siege tanks are there. If he wants to waste his banelings on your mech army, let him, because that's just a complete waste, and then you're going to have this huge bio force that's in the back. You don't even have to split it so much if you just actually pull it back and let him walk through your big AoE siege tank area. He's either going to lose them to the splash or lose them to the fact that he exploded them on a bunch of tanks that just aren't cost effective for him to have done that on, particularly if they're spread out. So overall, that's what I would work on here. Pre-split like that and improve your economy and production a little bit, and I think you'll find that you just don't have to worry about it. While it feels like you got destroyed by banelings, remember that at the end of that, the banelings are gone too. It's not that your army gets whitewashed out and they have an army left. They basically don't have anything left. Even this completely destructive force here in the middle, and that was an absolute rout. There's 4 Ultralisks left. That's it. And that army is basically gone, has to be reproduced. So if you've got the ability to reproduce yours, and it's up against their ability to reproduce theirs, which they have to get lings out, in position, morph them, you can end up ahead and just kind of steamroll them. So I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.